The year's 356 BC. One night in Pella, Macedonia, the sky cracks open with lightning. In the temple of Artemis, a fire breaks out. Elsewhere, a child is born, a boy with a mother who believes he's destined for the gods. His name is Alexander, and from his first breath, the world treats him as if fate has already spoken. His mother, Olympias, isn't just a queen. She's a priestess, a dreamer, a believer in divine threads stitched into bloodlines. She tells her son that Zeus fathered him, that serpents watched over his cradle, that Achilles' soul walks beside him. Alexander doesn't question it. He breathes it in. This isn't mythology, it's instruction. He grows up obsessed with stories, none more than Homer's Iliad. He keeps a copy beside his bed, annotated by Aristotle himself. He reads about Achilles like others read law or scripture, not to learn about the past, but to plot the future. At Troy, years later, Alexander visits the tomb of his childhood hero. He lays a wreath. He runs a race naked with his men, just as the ancients did, and he weeps. Because to him, Achilles was never dead. He was a standard to surpass. His education is legendary. Aristotle teaches him not just logic and ethics, but why men rule, how they fall, and what stories they tell themselves to survive. He learns about Herodotus, who wrote of tyrants and tricksters, about Xenophon's Cyropaedia, a guide to empire building disguised as biography, and about the Indian Brahmins, who lived in spiritual rebellion, scorning comfort and gold. Alexander doesn't just memorize their names, he studies their souls. But stories aren't just in books. Alexander's first myths are written in his household. His father, Philip, builds armies and alliances, leaving little room for sentiment. He mocks Alexander's belief in divinity. At a feast, Philip stumbles drunk and slurs,
"Macedonia's too small for you, is it?"
Alexander storms out, not because he's insulted, but because he knows it's true. His family is a battleground. Olympias whispers that Philip is mortal. Philip thunders that dreams are for poets. When Philip is assassinated, some say Olympias is involved. Alexander doesn't flinch. He takes the throne at 20, kills rivals, and mourns later. His crown isn't inherited, it's seized, sharpened by prophecy. When he crosses into Asia, he does so with a plan stitched together from dreams and texts. At Gordium, he faces the legendary knot said to bind the East. Instead of untying it, he slices it clean with his sword. He says,
"It doesn't matter how, only that it's done."
He believes the myth and then becomes it. In Egypt, he walks into the desert alone to consult the Oracle of Siwa. The priests greet him with a title, Son of Amun. He nods, as if it's old news. He walks out not just a conqueror, but a god confirmed. From that point on, Alexander signs his letters not as king, but as legend. He marries Roxana, a Bactrian princess, not in a grand ceremony, but in her father's tent. It's a political act, yes, but also deeply human. He sits with her people, eats their food, listens to their stories. He later arranges mass weddings between his officers and Persian women. It's not just strategy. It's his attempt to write unity into the bodies and names of his future. He weeps openly when his closest friend, Hephaestion, dies, orders mourning across the empire, cuts his hair in grief, like Achilles did for Patroclus. He may rule as a god, but he grieves as a man. He reads Euripides by candlelight, quotes Sophocles in speeches, and interrogates Diogenes the cynic, the man who told him to move aside because he was blocking the sun. Alexander laughs. He respects the defiance, because in Diogenes, he sees something he lost long ago, the freedom to need nothing. He doesn't raise his son, Alexander IV. The boy is born after his death. He leaves no dynasty. His generals fight over his empire like dogs over a feast. But Alexander wouldn't have been surprised. He once said,
"I am not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. I am afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion."
And he believed himself to be that lion. His image becomes gospel. On coins, his profile tilts skyward, noble, unreachable. In poetry, he's reimagined as Iskandar, the philosopher king. In Persian, Islamic, and Christian texts, he becomes a seeker, a blessed monarch, a mirror for 1,000 hopes. In India, he meets gymnosophers, naked sages who challenge him with riddles. One asks, "Which is greater, the day or the night?" Alexander thinks, smiles.
The day, because in it you can see.
The sage laughs. The two bow to each other. There is no victory, only respect. He builds libraries, not just walls, brings scribes into battle, reads stars before sieges, studies terrain like it's scripture. In every story, every fragment of wisdom, he searches for himself. Even in his most decisive moments, the stories never leave him. When a soldier presents him with a helmet full of water after days in the desert, Alexander pours it into the sand in front of his troops. He declares,
If my men cannot drink, then neither will I.
The gesture ripples through the ranks like a myth unfolding in real time. It isn't just leadership, it's theater, and every man watching becomes part of the legend. He once approached the gates of a defiant city, and instead of delivering threats, offered them a chance at legacy. Surrender, and your name will be etched alongside mine. Resist, and your memory will be lost to fire. He knew that men feared death, but they feared obscurity even more. In India, when his horse Bucephalus dies, he orders an entire city to be built in the animal's name, not just as a memorial, but as a statement. That loyalty, too, deserves a monument. The city of Bucephalus stands as proof that even a beast, if beloved, could earn immortality under Alexander's hand. Each of these acts was deliberate, constructed, and deeply personal, turning fleeting moments into lasting myth, because Alexander didn't just want to conquer the world. He wanted to be the story it told itself when no one else was listening. As the years passed and his empire stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River, Alexander began to sense the cost of his ambition. His army grew weary. Whispers of mutiny surfaced. In one moment of tension, on the banks of the Hephaestus River, his men refused to march further into India. Alexander raged, pleaded, and sulked, but ultimately relented. That night, he locked himself in his tent and reportedly spoke to the statue of Achilles, lamenting that even the gods must accept limits. This was the moment when the invincible child of prophecy became a man aware of time. He began to see signs everywhere. Omens turned darker. The stars he once read like maps now flickered with uncertainty. In Babylon, he oversaw grand plans, new cities, new laws, a unified empire of East and West. But he also saw shadows. Some say he drank more. Others say he began to isolate himself. Still, he dictated plans for exploration of the Arabian Peninsula and the circumnavigation of Africa. His dreams had no shoreline. At the end, he falls ill in Babylon. Feverish, fading, he's asked to name his heir. He whispers,
To the strongest.
Some say it was a riddle. Others say it was a warning. There's a line in the Iliad he likely knew by heart. There's nothing alive more agonized than man of all that breathe and crawl across the earth. Alexander knew agony. He knew longing. He knew the weight of trying to outlive your own story. He didn't leave behind a doctrine, but he left behind a philosophy. That destiny is not found in prophecy, but in pursuit. That greatness is shaped not just by action, but by reflection. That if you live as if the myths are true, one day someone might write one about you. He lived by words, ancient ones, heroic ones, often contradictory, always powerful. And those words, whether etched into scrolls whispered by teachers or carved into coin, became the foundation of his empire. Because in the end, Alexander wasn't driven just by conquest. He was driven by the words he lived by. If stories like this move you, uncover more with us. Subscribe to Hidden History Project and follow the words they live by.